It's the greatest showtime!
Okay, ready or no? Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 203, and our film this week was 2006 Paprika. Joining me to talk about it, she's seen it before and brought it to me, it's Amy Frost. Amy, how are you?
I'm good. I've wanted to make you watch this one for a hot second.
All right, so give me your history with Paprika. Where did you hear about it for the first time? When did you see it? Give me a little bit of that.
All right, so I did go through a pretty heavy anime phase in the 2000s. So it's somewhere stuck in there. You're probably gonna have a lot of questions about this movie, and my answer will always be like, well, Japan. Because sooner or later it does boil down to that a lot of the time. I can't pinpoint it, but I do own it on DVD, which I'm assuming was the only way that I was able to watch it in the first place, was purchasing the DVD. Yeah, I love this movie so much, and I'm so excited.
So this was a movie I had heard of. It's referenced often in both anime circles, just straight film circles, reference this movie quite a bit for its influence on a few different things and the director's influence on stuff. We'll kind of get into that. But I had never seen it. It was just one that it was never high on my radar. Like, I don't avoid anime, but I don't seek it out and rabidly watch everything that I can. However, it seems like almost always when somebody's like, you should really watch this, this movie or this series, I end up liking it.
Yeah.
And like, I've seen a couple of Miyazaki films in theaters. I remember when Spirited Away came out, they ran it in our local theater here during its initial run. So I went and saw that. I loved it because I love Princess Mononoke so much. Yeah. And I think the most recent anime that we've done for this show was one called Redline that I watched last year. That was really surprisingly good. And it was kind of one of those going into it. I'm like, I'll probably enjoy this, but I didn't realize how much. Paprika falls into that same category, much like the Japanese film I watched last week, Fish Story, which was, I got a feeling I'm going to enjoy this just because so many people talk great about it and it's got such a good reputation. But this is really good. This is a really good movie. And it is not a movie for everyone. I'm going to put that right front and center.
I'm pretty sure that if I'm the one bringing the movie, it's pretty much a guarantee it's not for everyone.
I mean, yes, but I have had discussions. When I covered 12 Monkeys a couple months ago, my guest didn't love that, and in part because it's a Terry Gilliam, so there's a lot of surrealism in it.
Oh yeah,
and that's this movie. This movie is a surrealist, in like the truest sense. Type of movie. Anime already gets a reputation for just being weird because, as you said, Japan. For a Western audience, it's a very different style of storytelling.
Yes.
This is weird even by those standards. And weird in weird in a way of like, it's not a traditional story where you're going from A to B to C telling a progressive narrative. There's stuff in there. There is a narrative going on.
Yeah.
But there's so much else happening at the same time that you're trying to juggle and take care of. And for me, one of my big pillars of whether it's a book or a TV series or a movie or a video game or whatever, less so necessarily with video games, although it helps, is a good story. I want a story that's going to engage me. And it doesn't have to be a narrative plot flowing from A to B to C linearly. It doesn't. I don't need that for it to be a good story. One of my favorite books I've ever read and that had a huge impact on me makes zero sense if you think of it in that way. So you just can't. And this falls into that. I love surrealism, and I love this, like, the stuff that kind of makes your brain itch a little bit. You get done watching it, you're like, I think I liked that, but I'm not sure. And you have to like process and think about it. And you're like, the more that happens for me, the more I end up liking the thing. And then I want to go back and watch it more. And with that new mindset and that new perspective of, now I've seen it once. It's why I like Terry Gilliam's films.
Yep.
Because you can watch them over and over, and you're always going to get something new from them.
Yeah.
There's certain movies I like to watch over and over that is that comfort food. It's that big bowl of mac and cheese or beef stroganoff or whatever you want it to be, where, like, Running Scared, for instance, basically the same experience every time I watch it, but it's like putting on a warm sweater, and I love it. A movie like this, or Brazil, or something like that, I'm going to watch it over and over, and I'm getting something different every time, like drastically different. So that's the first thing I want to say is it's not a movie for everyone, but oh boy, if you can kind of adjust your viewpoint to match kind of what this movie needs to be, it's something else. There's a lot going on here. And I love too how it plays with dreams and reality, because to me, that's another thing that's very interesting. These dream sequences kind of hit close to the mark for me personally, because it's like my dreams.
Sure.
My dreams, when I can remember them, are bizarre. And they do a lot of these same things where you shift perspectives and locations and time, and weird stuff happens. I've had the experience of trying to run down a hallway in a dream, and the floor starts to go wibbly wobbly, or it's like quicksand, and you can't, like, no matter how hard I try to run, I can't run, type of thing. Like, I've experienced that in a dream vividly.
Sure.
So there was a lot of that I kind of identified with and attached to in this, that just weird surrealistic moments of craziness within this dream. But then the movie and the narrative have this way of, you're never entirely sure if you're in a dream or reality throughout the movie. There's subtle, and they try to give you some subtle clues. I feel like there's some coloring and things like that sort of try to tip you off, but then those rules just get tossed out the window at some points, where you're led to believe there's dream within a dream moments, and there's all sorts of stuff like that in ways, and it's all done in ways that only animation can give you.
So that's one of my favorite things about this. One of my big complaints about, like, the second batch of Love, Death, and Robots was there was a lot of very, like, hyper realistic shorts. And, like, that's fine, but animation is a medium where, but why are you making it animated then? Like, what's the point of doing it in animation other than, like, as a tech demo, which, okay, but that's not particularly interesting. This movie, now there was talk of a live action version of this movie at one point, which I'm very glad didn't happen, because this is a movie that celebrates the fact that you can do whatever you want in animation.
Yeah. I mean, we got a little bit of the live action version of this movie in 2010 when Chris Nolan made Inception, which was very... After you see Paprika, you can see the influence on it, but I think even Nolan has said that he's a fan of anime, and I believe he's mentioned that it was... that it influenced the visual style of Inception.
Yeah, there's the scene where she's running down the hall, she's running away from the vines, from the chairman, and she runs up the wall, and that exact scene is in Inception. I mean, not the vines part, but I mean, it's just shot for shot. It's the same thing.
There's that.
Which is one of those things. Because I'd seen this movie when Inception came out, and I loved this movie when Inception came out, and I was like, well, this is just worse Paprika. What are we doing?
Well, I will say, and it's been a few years since I've seen Inception, but I can see that. I also think that it's a different, because I do think what Nolan was trying to do was take take the kernel, the seed of the idea of something like Paprika with the whole mixture of dreams and reality,
Yeah.
and adapt it into a story that could be told in a live action medium, while bringing in some of the imagery that you had in Paprika from Satoshi Kon, because you're never going to replicate the animated experience. You're just not. Aronofsky, another person who is heavily influenced by anime and Satoshi Kon in particular, is Darren Aronofsky. He's actually got like some shot for shot moments in things like Requiem for a Dream that were from Perfect Blue. I guess Aronofsky at one point was trying to get the live action rights for Perfect Blue, which is another one I have not seen, but I know of, and I know bits and pieces of it.
I haven't seen that one either.
And that was one also. Aronofsky's Black Swan has a lot of Perfect Blue parallels to it as well. But I think what Nolan was trying to do, and I can't really say which is better, because I feel like between Paprika and Inception, for me, they're so different in their execution of what is essentially the same kind of an idea of this exploration of what is reality versus what is our dream subconscious. And which one is truly the real world, and what happens when you blur the lines between the two. But it's a different, it's like hearing a song and then hearing a really good cover of that song, but it's transformative. It's a different version of it. And so I feel like that's more of what Nolan did with Inception. Now, I saw Inception first, so maybe there's a little bit of that at play. But I feel like that's more of what Nolan was doing, because you're just not going to. But it was really cool to see, like, in this, there's that moment where where Paprika finds the broken mirror, and she steps through that world into the other part of the dream. And then I remember that moment from Inception, and I was like, okay, they didn't try to just do exactly the same thing, but they gave you a very similar piece of imagery used in a slightly different way. I think that from a dream sequence standpoint, Paprika just blows it out of the water, because there's no way there's no way to go the lengths and the places that they went with the dreams that in a live action setting that you can do in animation.
Right.
It's why I didn't hate the live action Ghost in the Shell film from a few years ago. I thought that it was well done, but the problem that you have is if you try to compare it to the anime of Ghost in the Shell. It's not fair. Ghost in the Shell is so much better because it can go further, it can take more risks, it can do different things in an animation that you just can't do. And this is where my room temperature take is going to come from, which is anyone that says animation is only for children that's shorthand for they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Yeah. Because it's just plainly wrong.
Yeah, I was scrolling through Twitter just before this, and it was I saw someone saying, and they are absolutely correct, that Avatar, like the new Avatar movie, is an animated film and should be treated as such. Like it, and the fact that he gets real mad when people say that is, like it's just a medium. Like it's like anything else.
Mm-hmm. It is, and I think that there is room for all of it, whether it's going to be animation that is purposely aimed at young children and made for that, or it's animation that is going to kind of bridge the gap and be a little bit for everybody, or it's going to be something that is clearly aimed at an adult audience, and that can be done in several different ways. It doesn't have to be heavy metal. It doesn't have to be Love, Death, and Robots. It can be something that's just like, I don't see a point in showing a movie like this to anybody under the age of like 17, because it's just going to be lost on them. There's so much of it that it's just going to shoot right over their head, and the visuals aren't going to make any sense. So there's a lot of that
the
to it
name
too.
of it, but there's the new one that just came to Netflix, the Japanese horror shorts.
Okay, we're back. We're back. All right, I'll start recording. I was talking about animation.
You said I was lucky, my parents, and
Got
then
it.
you went away.
Okay. So I was kind of lucky because my parents, when I was younger, we would pick up like either laser discs, or sometimes they were VHS tapes from like the library or something, and they would be collections of animated shorts from things like Canadian film broadcast something or other, like festivals and stuff like that. So I did get some exposure to some stuff that was not your traditional animated stuff that's on TV.
Yeah.
In the U.S. in the 80s and 90s. And that was nice because that did help to give me a better appreciation for things. I did certainly go through my phases where I thought cartoons are only for kids, or da-da-da. But I got out of that pretty quickly, and I realized, no, it's just another form of telling a story, and they can be a whole lot of fun. And so I love animation quite a bit. But another thing that I think is really cool that animation can do is in its editing. And that is one of the things that Satoshi Kon, I think, does in this movie phenomenally well. Is like the first, probably 4 minutes of this movie has like 9 match cuts in it.
Yep.
And those alone are such a cool way to tell this story, because you're using these match cuts. It disorients you at first. That's kind of what it is. I did read, as I was kind of doing some research on the movie, that one of his inspirations was the filmed version of Slaughterhouse-Five, which does use a lot of match cuts in it as well. I remember seeing that many years ago. I love stuff like that. The opening title sequence is fantastic for this movie. And it's full of these match cuts and these crazy transitions. And my favorite one is, it starts off and Paprika is in a restaurant eating a burger. So you get a close-up of the burger and her taking a big old bite out of this burger. And then some young men come up and start talking to her. And like this whole sequence is great, because first it's that close-up on the burger. Then we cut out to this wide shot, and she's very small in the frame, and they come into the frame and they start talking to her, and the camera never moves. It stays wide like that. And then it cuts in again, but it's her and like a reflection, but it's multiple versions of her reflection getting more and more annoyed. And then she leaves and she runs out the front door. And as she's going out the door, there's a guy. Is he on a skateboard or walking? I can't remember if he's on a skateboard or if he's just walking or what. But there's like this weird, it's almost like and another thing that you can do, and it's a fun way. It's not a match cut, but using like an object to wipe across your screen. And they don't quite do that, but there's this guy comes into frame as Paprika's coming out, and you lose her behind him. And he keeps going, and he turns towards the camera and starts coming towards camera, and she's gone, almost like she disappeared behind him. But then as he gets up to the camera, you see her on his T-shirt, and then the camera pushes into the T-shirt, and suddenly that's your space now. You've moved in space. And like, I love that. I love that. There's a point towards the end where they're running, and then she dives into the TV on a news broadcast, and suddenly she is wherever the news broadcast is going on. And
Which is so good, because when everyone follows her, you get to see from the other side that they are actually coming out of the television camera.
Yeah, it's
because
such a
obviously
cool... Right, but it's like that's a perspective
that's
rarely
dream
get.
logic.
Yeah, it is. But that's also the perspective you rarely get in that moment. Like, I've seen that gag done before where somebody goes into the TV and you end up there, but you never see the other side of it, and seeing somebody coming out of the camera lens and into the scene, which is also happening at the exact same time. But it is total dream logic. So like stuff like that was great. I just, there's so much in that those dream sequences in the dream world that is like odd and dizzying
Mhm.
and just amazing. And
Yeah.
I adored all of it.
Yeah, that parade is something else.
Oh yeah, and it just keeps growing.
Yep.
Like it just gets
The more and
crazier
more
and
people.
crazier.
Yeah, it's basically like it's because it represents sort of, your subconscious, and so it's supposed to be all the like debris that just sort of gets lost in your subconscious. And so the more people that join the dream, the more trash winds up there. I love the frogs though. I unapologetically love the frogs.
Oh, the frogs are great.
They're fantastic.
The frogs, I loved. Even there would be some foreshadowing. We would see the character of Tokita,
Mm-hmm.
and who, we are introduced to Tokita in the elevator. The elevator
We
opens up,
are.
and he is taking up the entirety of the elevator.
Yep.
And so then, what's her name? Chiba? Is that it?
Yeah.
Atsuko. She helps him out. Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I got to go back to the editing thing because there's another thing that Satoshi Kon does in his editing that I adored, which is because this is a movie that it's a movie that does not talk down to its audience.
No.
And there are moments where things happen, and the way that it's edited, you don't see the result, but then you see the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
So the first time we meet Tokita, and the doors open up, and you see Atsuko trying to help him out of the elevator, we don't see him get out of the elevator. It cuts away before we get that.
Yeah.
But we know it happened because later on he's out of the elevator, and we move on.
Yeah.
There's when the chief, is it chief, the little short guy,
Yeah.
when that scene where he gets affected by things and starts to lose it, which is our first time where that's our first leak of dream world coming into the real world. And he's talking, and then all of a sudden mid sentence he starts making less and less sense.
And at some point, like the first time that you see it, you go, are my subtitles okay? Like, I feel like something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Is this what it's like? Is this a bad one? Are we cool? Okay. All right. I understand now.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's crazy, and it just keeps going and going. But then he freaks out and runs out of the room and runs down the hallway, and you're watching this, and I'm like, oh no. Oh, I can see where this is going. And he leaps out of the window, and you see him in mid-flight, and then we fade out from that.
Yeah.
And then we come back later on, and he's just in a hospital bed.
Yep.
That, to me, is almost more unsettling and more effective than going through the whole process of him hitting the ground.
Right.
Because now my brain has to
Or
fill
a
in.
tree or
Yeah,
whatever, however this all shook out.
However it worked out that he survived, we don't
Yeah.
see that happen, and I kind of loved that about this movie because it's not the only time that happens. It happens
No.
over and over. It's like a thing that he does that I just think is brilliant. No, there's so much of that, and then just that crossover of sort of the surrealism of like dreams. The dream world is very surreal, and Paprika being kind of this almost a master of the dream world in a lot of ways. And then slowly figuring out over time that Atsuka and Paprika are the same person, just different aspects of her. And I thought that was kind of cool. It confused me at first, and then as things kept going, it kind of unfolded, and I sort of figured out what it was. Is like Paprika is sort of, it's her escape, right?
Yeah.
It's her escape from her reality is to be Paprika. But then she starts to confront that herself, because there's also a big thing of balance in this that I got.
Yes.
Of this idea of balancing things. Like, there's nothing wrong with escapism, and dreams are a form of escapism that we have.
Yeah.
Because we don't really know why we dream or what our dreams are. Go ahead and pick up from wherever you were, if you can remember.
Okay. So the other thing about Chiba using Paprika is that she's trying to help psychiatric patients, but
Mhm.
Chiba in reality is very cold and clinical and maybe not what these people need.
Yeah,
And she's also not, I mean, she's very, it also allows her to get close to people without having to actually get close to people.
true. Yeah, that's very, very true. It's interesting to me how different her dream persona is from her.
Yeah.
And like, while we don't get a Tokida's like real kind of dream persona, we only see him as the robot that he
Yeah.
sort of becomes.
Hmm.
His childlike nature makes you think that he's just sort of the same in his dreams as he is in reality. That
There
there's not
is
much
though we
difference to him.
do we do at one point see the handsome guy who Osanai, yeah, Osanai.
Yep.
We do see him as like a like giant god statue
Yeah.
when we're going through, you know what I mean? Like he's the guy that Takana wants to be, Takeda wants to be, you know.
Yeah, that's true. He does look up to him a little bit, and you also had who was the little assistant Himuro,
Yeah.
who sort of looked up to Takedo.
His
And
that so that I didn't remember. It had been a hot second since I watched the movie, and I
sure.
did not remember his house so much.
Mm.
And so that's another one where you do kind of wonder where the line of reality is, and maybe you hope it's a little further away because his house is really creepy.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That was it was a strange one, and again, you get that moment where, like, when did Chiba cross into the dream in
Right.
that room? Was it when she looked at the photo? Because
Yeah.
about the time she looks at the photos, when you see the little like the doll figure that's in the
Yeah.
closet,
Right.
and but like it's hard to tell. Like it's
Yeah.
really, and they do that deliberately. So
Oh yeah, absolutely.
um but yeah, I really connected with the idea of the balancing with
Hmm.
the detective, and this whole idea of movies and dreams and reality, and how they're three different aspects of things. Dreams and movies kind of played the same role but differently.
Yeah.
His dreams all focused around movies, and then that part where he starts explaining film kind of theory to
Yeah.
Paprika in the dream, and he looks like Akira Kurosawa
Oh
while
yeah.
he's doing it,
It's real good.
was great. And just this idea of like his dreams were very cinematic, and then you get to
Right.
somebody else's dreams and they weren't cinematic, they were just off the wall, out there, crazy. Like Takedo's dreams were all over the place,
Hmm.
and you start getting this mesh, and they get weirder as you go along because you're incorporating more and more dreams into this
Right.
collective dream that's all being run by their like chairman, I
Yep.
think it was, who
Hmm.
that guy was out there, and but his thing was he was using the escapism of the dreams to fulfill the fantasies he had of like being able to walk
Yeah.
and use his legs and have power and have control that he already had in real life, being the chairman and being in a position of power, but that wasn't enough for him, so he needed more.
Right.
And he was using Osanai
Mm.
in a way as well, which that was some weird imagery too of the two of them melded together.
Yep.
But absolutely loved the moment where they split and he bursts into the bunch of butterflies.
Butterflies.
That was such a
Yep.
cool visual. That was a really cool visual that ended a very strange sequence of visuals that were
Yeah.
odd and very uncomfortable,
Uh-huh.
and got more and more like they got weirder as they went along, because it's very, very creepy when
Yeah.
when he captures Paprika. Osane does.
Yep.
and has her on the table like a butterfly.
Yep.
And that whole scene is because it sort of feels like it comes out of nowhere. And maybe if I watch it again, I'll sort of see the signs coming for that. But the whole idea of his obsession with her.
Yeah.
But it starts off creepy enough, and then there's a lot of handsiness that is not comfortable to watch, and it just keeps going. It keeps pushing that
envelope. And then
envelope.
it gets weird, like, because you're like, this is already uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? Because he like runs his hand down her, and then his hand just sinks into her, and you're like, oh no, what is happening?
And then he just like unzips her,
Yeah.
and it's Chiba
It's so
underneath, and
upsetting.
it's so, oh man, it's like, it's so weird. And it's not the first time we've seen that imagery, but it's such a different way it's done here, because
Oh yeah.
Paprika did it earlier, something similar to that earlier with the chief, when he's first stuck in there in that dream where he's sitting on top of all the dolls and the toys and all that. And she lays on top of him. And again, she morphs into this very submissive little Japanese girl to kind of get through his defenses, and then gets right up on him, morphs back into Paprika and he sort of recognizes her at that point, and then she just melts into him and says something to the effect of, didn't she say something when she was doing that, like, I'm going to have to get a little rough here?
Yeah, something like that.
And I was like, what is happening? What is going on? And then he like inflates like a balloon and blows up.
Yep.
It's so weird.
So weird.
And that's really, really weird, but it was a lot less uncomfortable than what happened to her later on. Like, that was just so, it was something else. And the way that all ends, and as that's all going on, you've got the detective sitting in the theater watching that happen and trying to get in there, which was another really crazy visual to see, because all you see is him against the wall of the theater.
Yep.
And then you sort of forget about him for a little bit, because now we're focused on this really uncomfortable scene playing out. And then in the background, you suddenly see this impression of him kind of coming through the wall. And it's like, whoa, oh, that's right, he was there. Like, there's a lot of, oh yeah, that was still going on, stuff happening. Kind of all over this movie.
Shout out to him for like being like, he checks on her, and then he's like, oh, here. He takes off his coat.
Have my jacket. Wrap her up in that, and then get her out of there. And
that's the best. So he walks out, right? So then Shima, the little chief there.
That's his name, yes.
Right. So Shima's calling in, right? Because he thinks that Chiba is like gone, like he can't get in. He's trying to fall asleep and dream, but he's too stressed to dream, so he can't get in there. And so when he sees Konakawa carrying her out of the theater, right? And he's like, oh, it's you. Why are you there? Why do you have her? And he's like in a poster of the Tarzan movie, like as a monkey. And he's just like, why are you a monkey? And I was like, not now. This is not the important part.
It's not, but at the same time, that also that would be my first question.
It's very good. Yes.
Is why are you a monkey? Like, I laughed so much at that. It was
good.
real good. And just this idea that like he's trying to work out, because there's a story going on where he's trying to figure out this murder case.
Yeah.
And
which is ultimately not super important.
It's not, but it's also like very important, because it's very important for him. Sure. And it's another case of a thing that happens that we don't see the resolution to it. We just see what happens after the resolution to that. Like, he figures out the case, but it's not important to us as the viewers, so we don't see any of that.
Right.
It's just the aftermath of, well, he's figured it out, and Paprika's happy for him, and she tells him to go see a movie, and he's fine with going to movies again because he figured out that his dreams, it was this whole idea of like his dreams were very much his subconscious working out problems that he had. Yeah. And things that had happened to him in the past, and it all centered around this guilt he apparently was harboring for an unnamed person whose face we never even see from his past.
Yeah.
Which, again, isn't the important part of what's going on. I read some reviews on this movie on like IMDb because I'm always curious about positive and negative reviews. And the negative reviews to this all told me that it was just a movie that wasn't for this person because they wanted...
And that's fine, which is fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, they wanted it to be something else.
They wanted it to be something else. They wanted it to be a straightforward narrative, and this movie doesn't give you that. And so I could see it being frustrating for somebody that wants to know about that story, and you're not going to get that. That's not what this movie's here to tell you. It's not here to tell you who took and how they took the DC Mini.
No.
The Dream device, or how the Dream device works, or why they were developing it in the first place, or how it came about, or any, like, none of that is important, and none of that really matters.
That they are using it for psychiatric work. That is the idea, is to be able to, like, especially because I think the implication is that it won't necessarily just work for dreams, but for like a lot of people, like especially say people who are non-communicative. Like if you have a way to then actually communicate with what's going on directly in their brain, this is a major medical triumph.
Yeah, I could see that. But it's just like the nuts and bolts of that, none of that matters.
That doesn't matter.
And this idea of like, what is reality? Is reality what we're experiencing, or is the reality? Because there's a moment where Chiba and Paprika are having a conversation. First of all, I loved the moment where Paprika shows up to help her save Shima.
Yeah.
And pulls him up, and they look at her, and she's just like, "This isn't time for questions. Let's go." And just they take off.
No, not
like,
now.
We're not going to explain it, and you're never going to find out. And I'm fine with that.
And what I love about Paprika, right? Because like you said, she's the master of the dream world, and so she, so like you have Konakawa trying to push through the movie screen to get into that room. Whereas you've got Paprika, who understands how things work because she is of that realm, and she climbs into a horse racing poster and gets on a horse.
Yeah, and just
rides
takes off.
Like it's just like, let's go.
So many moments like that. But there's a moment with Paprika and Chiba where they're kind of arguing of like, with this whole thing of like, well, why aren't you doing what I tell you to do, or why aren't we whatever? And Chiba says, look, you're just a part of me. You should listen. And Paprika comes back with like, how do you know you're not just a part of me? And it's that whole like, it's that looking into the mirror, is the mirror the reflection of me, or am I the reflection of the mirror type of thing?
Yeah.
And you can really fall down those rabbit holes and, take some mind altering substances and really get to enjoy it. But
yeah.
But it does at least give you these questions of, kind of, how do we define our reality?
Right.
And so much of what we define as reality is just interpretations of stimuli, which is no different than what dreams are. Dreams are interpretations of stimuli. It just happens to be when we're asleep.
Yeah.
So I just found that really fascinating, and I really enjoyed that. And this is the perfect medium to explore it in, because you can just go batshit crazy with the visuals.
Yeah.
And you can have a guy's hand turned into like wooden tentacles, or another head pop out of his shoulder. And it's like, hey, hi, how you doing? Like, whoa, no, I don't need that. I don't need to see that. Or like when she suddenly becomes sort of a fairy.
Yep.
And she's just flying around, because that's how you get around for that portion of things.
Yep. And then she's the mermaid.
Yep. When she falls in the water, she becomes a mermaid, and just like you said, the climbing into the poster of the horse racing and just taking off on a horse. I loved that. That was just great.
It's shades of Neo in the Matrix, right? The like, once you know that you can tap into the source code, you can do anything. It's a similar idea. She understands that anything goes. So great, we're gonna do what makes sense in the dream logic. And
it just gives you these really cool moments of sort of self-reflection too. And the fact that like it takes Paprika to sort of defeat the chairman, who has somehow merged with Osane
Yeah.
in some way and become a giant, mostly shadowed figure that's going to
Yeah.
reshape the cosmos and all of that. Gets really weird. Just roll with it.
Just go. Just go. It's fine.
But
Don't even
it
worry
takes
about it.
Paprika to defeat that. However, for Paprika to be able to do that, Chiba has to reconcile some things in her life and find some more balance.
Yeah.
And that's where we get that whole scene where we flash back to her helping him out of the elevator, helping Tokita out of the elevator,
Yeah.
and their conversation there, because that was a character arc that went some places with Chiba, who, like you said, is very cold, clinical.
Yeah.
There's even a scene where she freaks out on Tokita and starts yelling at him and calling him a
There's
fat
a few.
slob.
Yeah.
Well, and that built up, right? So at first it was just sort of the offhand comment of like, maybe you eat a little bit too much, because he's at the restaurant and he's getting like 4 orders of food, which was another thing that
It
I
all
kind of
looks
identified
so good.
with.
Anime food is everything.
The jumbo steak, yes, that's me.
It looks
Udon noodles, all that. But it starts like, that's a fairly benign kind of jab. She just sort of makes a comment about it, but it's not really mean spirited necessarily. She's just like, oh, look, maybe you just eat too much, and that's your problem. But she gets more and more kind of aggressive about it over time, until the scene where he's obsessing over working on the DC Mini and figuring out how to do things, and she flips out on him. So then to have it flash back to that first meeting we see of them. Now, it's not their first meeting, but like our introduction to the two characters, and seeing what happened after they cut away from her pulling him out of the elevator. And that conversation, and that very, that just touching moment between the two of them, where she kind of had to come to the realization of like her feelings for him and her feelings for herself, and sort of in through that was able to let go of having to have the separation of her and Paprika all the time, and find a little balance point. And then Paprika can suddenly do what she did, which is turn into a giant naked lady and save the world, as you do.
Eat the shadow monster.
Yep.
Like you do. I mean, why not? Why not?
At that point, sure. And it worked. And it's just, it's a movie that has a lot of emotion in it too.
Yeah.
That we're not doing enough justice, but there's no way to explain a movie like this.
No.
You really need to see it and experience it. But I think that it's worth it. I think that if you are into surrealism at all, it's a very, very good thing to watch. If you're into animation, and specifically Japanese animation, I think that it's a great movie to watch, because
I mean, it's all hand drawn. Like this is like a thing to remember. There's a lot of work went into this, which I do. I absolutely love this.
It's really, really good. Now, as I said earlier, I don't have like I'm not a gigantic anime fan, but I do enjoy anime. And it oftentimes it's one of those things where somebody will say, hey, you should watch this. I end up liking it. Where does this fall for you in terms of like, is this one that you watch or would rewatch often? Is it kind of in your upper tier, or do you have others that you go to more often?
Yeah, this is definitely, I mean, it's like I said, I mean, it is weird, right? So you got, and there are uncomfortable parts.
Yes.
So like that, I don't want to say it makes it less rewatchable, because that's certainly not true. But no, I love this one. The music in this one is excellent. And there's like so much stuff. Like, so the movie that he's supposed to go see, that Paprika tells him to go see, was going to be Satoshi Kon's last full-length feature, but he died before it was finished, and it was never released. And you can see on the window of the ticket booth the posters. I mean, they're very sort of like, they're not really crisp or anything, but you can tell from the colors that they are his other movies.
Yes,
So that was all real good.
I did like
Real
that.
good. I love this one. It's especially for an anime movie. Like
Mhm.
I have a lot more anime series sort
Okay.
of in my rotation. But as movies go, this one's top tier.
Well, and at least a lot of the anime that I have experienced is very high concept, and so series makes more sense for that because
Yeah.
you need some more, and it benefits from more time to tell the stories.
One of my favorites is Spice and Wolf, which is about a guy who runs into basically a harvest god and takes her on a journey, but also it gets very deeply into complicated like finance discussions. It's like I don't know how to tell you. But yeah. Yeah, it gives you a lot more room to play.
Oh, it does. I
But
mean,
I
you look
do
at
love this.
something you look at something like Full Metal Alchemist comes from a manga and becomes a series, and
Yeah.
you can't tell that story in a single feature film.
No.
Uh,
No.
whether it's that or it's Seven Deadly Sins or it's any of the ones that take place at magic schools or the high school.
Yeah.
It's so much of it benefits from serialized and serialed storytelling
Yeah.
that that a feature film just isn't the right world for. But
Mhm.
I think that Paprika is perfect to do in this
Yeah.
self-contained story, where
Right.
we just get to sort of because it's not a big long narrative. It's more of a like an art piece.
Right.
It's kind of like my Miyazaki's films for me work because he never tried to make them any. There's never like continuations on the story.
Yeah.
There's not like this interconnectedness to them. It's like Princess Mononoke is this section out of. I'd be fascinated to know more about that world,
Sure.
but I don't need it because that story
Right.
and that movie does so much. They're Spirited Away does the same thing. All of
Yeah.
those.
There are like little threads that run through,
Mhm.
like the soot sprites and things like that. But yeah, they're all pretty self-contained.
Yeah, and this is definitely one I do. This does make me really want to. It makes me want to go back and watch Inception again because I want to see
Sure.
some of that. But it also really makes me want to watch Perfect Blue, which I hear has some weird and somewhat disturbing stuff. Not so much, I don't think, in the same way that like the scene in Paprika was, but I think it's got because it was a big influence on something like Black Swan
Right.
and the dual life. Because that's another thing is you get a lot of the like this had dual realities and sort of a dual life of Chiba. With Paprika, and Perfect Blue is supposed to have a lot of that dual life thing. Millennium Actress, I think, was another Satoshi Kon that's supposed to have a lot of that same kind of stuff in it. Just makes me want to check out more of his work because it's fascinating. And I just loved so much of the story that was being told, and I really, really like the technical aspect of what he did in the art style, in the animation, and in that editing. That editing just blew me away. Like the more I think about the editing in this movie and the fact that there's things you can do in animation editing even that you can't do in live action.
Right.
You can do insert shots that are 6, 7, 8 frames that would normally take
Yep.
you a second and a half, 2 seconds to do live action. You can do in almost no time, nearly subliminally, but not. Like you can still
Yeah.
consciously see it, but it's so quick and it almost lets you process it better. And it's much easier to remove visual information from a frame in order to
So the
focus.
the animation director for this was Masashi Ando, who did Princess Mononoke and Spirited
Okay.
Away.
Well, that probably explains a little bit of why I like the animation so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just bonkers, but man, was I just drawn into this whole thing, and I was like, give me more. And you mentioned the music, and the music was cool because it was so weird and different. in between like the dream, and then you get into the dream sequence, and it's that march that keeps playing of the parade,
Yeah.
and that was crazy. And I really, really enjoyed all of that too. I just visually, auditory, all like this movie was well done, well put together. I understand why it has the reputation that it does, and it is, as I said, not a movie for everyone. So, your mileage may vary, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a worthwhile thing to see. And I just think I'm going to kind of come back to, I feel like animation in general just doesn't, there's too many people that are closed off to it. It's the same, and I've heard the same thing of people that will disregard a story because it's a medieval fantasy story, and they just can't get into that. And it's unfortunate because I do think you lose something in not allowing yourself to take in stories that are from a genre or a style that isn't the same all the time. I think that it's it is, because if you don't step outside your comfort zone of kind of the things that you're going to always watch, you might not find that thing that, like Fish Story from last week. Miles tells me about this movie. Come to find out, it's one of his 5 like favorite movies of all time, and it's definitely not something that I would have sought out on my own. And then I sit down and I watch it, and I'm just blown away by it. I bring up Amelie a lot because it's another one of those you brought to me.
I did.
Where
I did. That one is precious to me. Like that one is, I wind up a lot of times, like this, I wind up wary of sharing with people because, as you say, it is not for everyone. Amelie, I wind up being a little wary because it's like, if you don't like this movie, I don't know that we can continue to be friends because I don't feel like you understand me as a human.
I mean, I kind of, I get what you're going for, or I get where you're going with that. And it can happen. I have, and I don't think you have to go weird for something to be outside your comfort zone either.
No.
But like, I'm the same way when it comes to kind of music and books and art in general. I'm not going to dismiss something because it is a thing. I'm going to, odds are, if I hear, like a lot of pop music doesn't tend to do much for me, but it's not, it's not because it's pop music. It's just the way that it hits my ear. But then every once in a while I hear a song and I'm like, holy hell, that's really good. I just love, I love this song, and I can't explain why, but it works. And it's the same thing that happens to me with a movie or a television show that shouldn't, like, that on paper doesn't make any sense that I would like it. And then I watch it or I listen to it or I read it and I'm like, this was great. This was the greatest thing I've ever seen. That's
like my deep love of The Great Escape. There is no reason on earth I should love that movie the way I do. But here we are.
Yeah. Like the Venn diagram of you and your likes and The Great Escape doesn't seem as though it should have an overlap at all.
The one over, it's Eddie Izzard is the overlap, and that's how we got there. And
but
turns out it's a real good movie.
Yeah. And then you can watch Chicken Run. It's the same movie.
Yep, same movie.
But yeah, I just think that there's not enough kind of love for animation in general amongst sort of a broader audience. There's too many people that think, it's just for kids. And open your mind to it. Let it kind of, watch something animated and see. Even if it's like animation, you had mentioned earlier about like hyper realistic animation.
Yeah.
Sort of this idea of like, well, why even animate it then?
Yeah.
Which I get, because I think that, again, animation is such a creative medium that you can go so many different places to. But also, I kind of like, I appreciate and really enjoyed Richard Linklater's A Scanner Darkly film.
Sure.
Because he did the rotoscoping of that. There's no need to animate it, but there was something cool about watching this story unfold and in that visual style that I really enjoyed. That's one of the things I liked about Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings was his use of, he had to cut a lot of corners and save some money. So some ways he could do that were rotoscoping and like filming people on a high contrast white background in silhouette and throwing that into his animated movie. But it
What
ended up
was
making for a
was
really
it Seventh Guest that used to have all the like weird live actiony cutscene things in it?
oh yeah
The
seventh.
game? Yeah.
There was a lot of those
Yes.
in that era.
Oh
Seventh
yeah. It
Guest,
was a good
11th
time.
Hour, Return to
Yeah.
Zork used a lot of full motion video.
Yeah.
But I think it's always curious to me when you see stuff like that. It's Bakshi is one that I really liked. What is the guy who made The Thief and the Cobbler? I can never remember his name. I mentioned him, Richard Williams.
There you
That's
go.
who it was. I mentioned him a few weeks ago when I saw Zardoz, thinking like it was like live action Richard Williams watching Zardoz. And I love stuff like that. I like that just I love how animation can be as hyper realistic or as zany as you want. You can have something like Phineas and Ferb where if you want to really dive into it, you can't figure out how Phineas can ever put a shirt on because his head is too
Yeah.
big. Like he's got a giant triangular shaped head and a tiny little shirt
Yeah.
neck hole. But at the same time, you don't care. Like it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's just fun visual to have. And I love
watch a lot of animation. Like now that I'm like stopping to think about it, I watch an awful lot of animation on like a day to day.
And that's not even getting into things like claymation and stop motion, which can go in all
Which
sorts of
I'm
different
so glad
ways.
that I'm so glad that there are people holding on to that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
because
absolutely.
it would be infinitely easier to do it digitally, like just beyond beyond easier to do it digitally. And I'm happy that people are not, because that I went long time when I was growing up. That was what I wanted to do. I don't have the attention span for it.
I would love to be better at stuff like that because I think that the filming of something like stop motion is so much fun. I was never good at making my own things to do stop motion with. But I also like how there's still people holding on to traditional stop motion as well as utilizing digital animation in a stop motion style. When I saw the Lego movie for the first time, then to realize that none of that was made with an actual physical Lego at any point. And that it was, but
that's a good one.
They gave it the feel of traditional stop motion, and I appreciated that because I liked that better than if they had tried to make it smoother and not look like that stop motion. I wanted that little bit of like
because
lack of motion
blur
to
Legos
it.
would move, obviously.
Clearly. So I like the mixture of both, though. I like being able to use our modern technology, but not forget about the things of the past. But then there's still people. It's just like digital art versus somebody who grabs a paintbrush and slaps paint onto a physical canvas. All of it should be there, and all of it has a place. And I think that animation has a place in film and in television right alongside live action. And I think that you can tell a similar story in both mediums, and the executions of them are so different that I try not to say, well, this is better than that, but there's aspects of Paprika that are better than what Inception was trying to do. And that's not a knock on Inception. It's just that you can do that in animation. It's so much easier to have a moment where she tries to jump over that guardrail and everything bends and swirls, and suddenly she's nearly jumping out the window or jumping off the balcony of that building. That you couldn't pull that off in live action and have it look right. Not in the way that you can do it in animation. So there's, but I like seeing the influences of animation on artists and on film directors too.
Sure.
And seeing them incorporating similar things. Sometimes full-on shots, as Aronofsky is well known to do. Nothing wrong with that, though. There's a quote. I don't know if it's actually from Picasso or not. It's murky whether or not it is, but it's good artists. Sure. What is it? Good artists copy, great artists steal.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit to that. Everything's going to be influenced by something else. It's just a question of how much and what type of credit you give to what came before. So, yeah, Paprika is really good. Everybody, you should watch it.
Yay.
It is not on any streaming services, but you can rent it just about anywhere.
Yep.
Or go pick up a DVD. I'm sure it's still on DVDs and Blu-rays out there somewhere.
I'm
So,
sure.
but
Absolutely.
it's a ton of fun, and I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm going to be watching it again. I know that. If for nothing else, then to try to like kind of piece together and understand more of it and peel back more of the layers of what it
Right.
was. I think that's going to be fascinating to kind of do and watch it again. It's sort of, and I've used this metaphor before, but it's going to a play. And the first time, if you go to a play and you sit in the theater and you watch it, and you go
Yep.
again, but you sit in a different part of the theater,
Oh
and
yeah.
you watch the same play with the same actors from the same run, it's two different experiences sitting in different parts of the theater. And for
Yeah.
me, that's what a movie like this is to rewatch. I'm rewatching
Sure.
it, and it's going to be a wholly new experience because of what I know now and what I've gone
Right.
through with it. So it's not just going to be crazy visuals. I'm going to be able to kind of figure more things out. And I
Yeah.
love that. I can't wait. Super fun.
Yay.
So thank you so much for this recommendation and for finally
You're
getting me to
very
watch this.
welcome. Yes.
Now, if you enjoy conversations like this and you want to watch it happen live, usually without interruption, but what can you do? You can do that most Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time at twitch.tv/tvstravis. We're here and every week. And normally the internet connection stays up long enough to get through an entire episode. Sometimes it breaks down 2 or 3 times. It's just going to be a roll of the dice and what's going to happen that night. We're going to have fun with it. But Amy, is Aquilo coming back soon? What's going on with that?
Aquilo will be back for season 6. What?
Crazy.
Season 6 will be starting in early March. I am hesitant to give an exact date because every time I do that, everything falls apart. So we're just gonna say early March. We're also working on putting together a hey, so you're new here, for people who don't want to listen to all 5 seasons before they start the new season. So that'll be like a little catch-up episode that
A
we are
tasting
also working
menu,
on.
if you will.
Yeah. A last week on, but to cover the last 2.5 years.
I like it.
Yeah. So early March they'll be back, which is plenty of
Excellent.
time if you do want to start now.
I
If you
mean,
haven't listened, you've got plenty of time to catch up.
if you haven't listened or you're like me and you just want to listen again, you got plenty of time to
Yeah.
catch up because
Mhm.
it's some of my favorite storytelling
Thank
podcasts
you.
going because JF's writing is great and your delivery of all of it just puts you right in there. I also saw your stickers for Stranger Limits.
They are very cool. I am very excited about them. It was sort of an impulse purchase.
Yes, but a great one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very cool. Aquilo.com. Check it out.
Yes.
New season 6, early March-ish. Somewhere coming soon. Definitely
Mhm.
cool. This show comes out on Wednesdays every week, 203 weeks and counting, because I'm insane. If you like this show, ratings and reviews on your favorite podcast platform, huge, make the show more discoverable, and I appreciate those. If you want to help out in another way, there is a Patreon for this show, patreon.com/WYHS. And you can, little as $1 an episode, and you get access to things on Discord. I'm going to start doing some monthly movie catch-ups where we'll go through the back catalog. We'll vote on a movie that patrons haven't seen before maybe and want to catch up on. We can go through the list of episodes, figure one out, and watch one of those every month. There's also merch at... if you go to tvstravis.com, you can find the links for all of this, Patreon, Ko-fi, and the merch store. I did have a friend of mine find out that I had merch, and he immediately bought a hat and sent me a picture of him in the the bucket hat.
Yeah.
and
yeah.
and he's heading to Hawaii on vacation in the next couple of weeks. He's like, I'm taking this with me. So I'm
Perfect.
excited to see that. He's going to send me pictures of the bucket hat from Hawaii.
Outstanding.
So yeah. Now next week I'm talking. This one's gonna be fun. Howard the Duck. I get to expose somebody to Howard the Duck, and let me tell you, it's gonna be something else. Because I don't know if he is prepared for duck boobs, but
No one is.
you know, it is what it is. And Titanic also coming up soon with Mr. Tom Merritt. Still can't figure out how he missed that one, but we're going to find out. We're going to talk about it. And more fun stuff coming down the pipe as we go. So definitely stick around for that. tvstravis.com, newly redesigned. That's the place to find all the info on all the shows that I do and everything. So Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for yet another great recommendation. You're batting 1,000, by the way.
My record remains intact.
So until next week and Howard the Duck, enjoy your movies, everybody. And remember, be excellent to each other.
Paprika?
Eva!